evolution say people came from monkeys. And the question is, why is there still monkeys? You dumb. These are retarded monkeys. They didn't turn into people just yet.
Worldview. The comprehensive interpretation of one's reality and the inspiration of a person's religion, philosophy, thoughts, and actions. It's the perception of seeing the glass as either half empty or half full. It also determines how a person looks at evidence about how the world was created. The same observational evidences are available for everyone to see, yet amateur and professional scientists alike reach different conclusions about the data. That's because everyone starts with presuppositions, meaning something assumed beforehand to be true. For example, a blind man asks a man the color of the sky. The man tells him gray, and the blind man believes him. What may he assume? That the man he asks is not colorblind, for one. The same goes for the evidences of science. These days, there are scientists that first assume there is no God, so they look for naturalistic means of the material world. There are those scientists who believe science is observing the things that God made, and without him there is no science. One such debate is that of creationism and evolution. Science in Hebrew is madha, meaning knowledge, including that which has become known or revealed. Another word is intelligence, as in perceiving, looking, and considering. Science also refers to the mind and thought, the place of knowledge. The word science is mentioned 2 times in the Bible. First in Daniel 1:4, which says that God gave to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego skill in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science. Today, the 7 steps to the scientific method are: make an observation, ask a question, form a testable explanation, make a prediction, test the prediction, and redo the test to be sure. However, 1 Timothy 6:20 states, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. In other words, a pseudoscience, one that presents as though it follows the scientific method, but does not. There was a time when evolution was deemed unscientific. In the famous monkey Scopes trial that went on from July 10th to July 21st, 1925, John Thomas Scopes was convicted of teaching evolution in his classroom. He had violated the Butler Act, which made it unlawful to deny the biblical account of creation and explicitly forbade the teaching that man was a lower form of animal. Many states had similar laws on the books. According to evolution, a change in the characteristics of a species happens over time. These changes are inherited in a process called natural selection. When an organism is in a new environment, over a course of time, it will begin to adapt characteristics that make it more likely to survive. Scientists called this mechanism survival of the fittest. The new genes are then passed down to the next generation. Eventually, a whole new species emerges. Natural selection ends less improved forms and leads to a divergence of character. Natural selection needs heritable variation as starting material. Heritable variation are random mutations that occur to genetic material. By definition, mutations are mistakes made in cell division or a cell exposed to DNA-damaging agents in an environment. Evolution goes even further to suggest that this mutation happened in a common ancestor long ago, which caused its lineage to branch, creating every species on Earth. After a while, apes became humans, a highly intelligent ape who walked on 2 legs. The term human is placed in the zoological family Hominidae, the taxonomic category for great apes, which include gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans. Humans are also classified in the primate group for mammals or warm-blooded vertebrate animals with fur or hair, with animals who birth live young and feed by milk. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, 1744 to 1829, is the first to propose a fully formed theory of evolution he called the transmutation of species. Lamarck believed simple life forms continually came into existence from dead matter and became more complex, transforming into a new species until attaining the perfection of a human being. He believed in a method of use and disuse. If an organism does not use a trait, it fails to develop. But if a trait is needed, there is a transmission of an acquired characteristic. Organisms grow increasingly complex, and there's no extinction. A species on the verge of dying transmutates into a different species. Transmutation is a term that comes from alchemy to describe the process of turning base metals into gold. In Hermeticism, an ancient tradition of esotericism and the study of philosophy and magic dates back to before Egypt, and teaches that humans are divine brothers and sisters of God, and the moment humankind reaches his full potential in consciousness at this current evolutionary state, the great work will complete. That is the ability to bring unconscious things to consciousness, or the dead things to life.
That I don't want to be an icon. I want to be an idea. You know, I want to represent an idea. I want to represent possibilities. I want to represent magic, right? That you're in a universe and 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 only equals 4 if you accept that 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 is going to be what I want it to be. You know, and there's a redemptive power that making a choice has, you know, rather than feeling like you're at effect to all the things that are happening.
Did you hear what Will Smith said? He said he wants to represent magic. Rebellion is as the sin of what? Witchcraft, which is magic. This is another man in rebellion to God and letting you know up front what he's on. Then he goes on to say that 2 + 2 is only 4 if he accepts it. No, 2 + 2 is an absolute truth, and truth is not true just because you decide to believe it. It's true in spite of. He says 2 + 2 is going to be whatever he wants it to be. Well, now, see, this is the problem. 1 Timothy says that they will oppose science falsely. Romans 1 says that they will suppress the truth in unrighteousness, and then go on to make up their own so-called reality, just like Will Smith said they do, and just like we're seeing today. Men are women and women are men. I'm surprised dogs are still dogs and cats are still cats.
Like, you just decide what it's going to be, who you're going to be, how you're going to do it. Just decide. And then from that point, the universe is going to get out your way. It's like, it's water. It wants to move and go around stuff, you know. So for me, I want to represent possibilities. I want to represent the idea that you really can make what you want. One of my favorite books is the Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. And I just believe that. I believe that I can create whatever I want to create. If I can put my head on it right, study it, learn the patterns, and, you know, it's hard to put into words, some real metaphysical, esoteric nonsense. That's a good Scrabble word, alchemist. No, but the alchemist, right? Because it's great. Like, what I consider myself an alchemist. An alchemist is basically a mystical chemist, right? And one of the great feats that alchemists used to do is they would take lead, just take a chunk of lead, and they could turn lead into gold.
When a Hermetic philosopher is initiated, they learn about the great work. Accomplishing the great work is symbolized as the creation of the philosopher's stone, capable of turning base metals into gold, but also known as the elixir of life, a potion for immortality. The same potion Gilgamesh sought from Upanishad, survivor of the Great Flood, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Alchemists also sought the creation of panaceas, a cure-all remedy for all diseases. According to Eliphas Levi, famous for his depiction of Baphomet, said the great work is the creation of beings by and of themselves. Hermetic teachings are found in Freemasonry, Alchemy, Rosicrucianism, Gnosticism, and others. Famous Hermetic philosophers include Isaac Newton, Alexander the Great, Plato, Napoleon, Aristotle, Pythagoras, and the Founding Fathers. According to Manly P. Hall in the book The Secret Destiny of America, it states America is the place to complete the great work, and the secret history of the founders was to restore esoteric wisdom. Lamarck's influences began to influence philosophers such as Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace, and Charles Lyell. According to Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, giraffes had longer necks because after generations of eating from high trees, longer necks are better because they secure the food and have more offspring, thus it's selected.
Giraffe's blood. Giraffes grow up to 18 feet tall. How does it get its blood up to its head when it's standing up? It does so because it has the most powerful pump heart of all mammals. It has a 2.5 foot long heart which weighs 25 pounds, which will pump that blood up to 18 feet in the air. It has the highest blood pressure in animals and the thickest vessel walls of any mammal. It has one-way valves in its neck and arteries, like veins. You may not know this, but your veins in your legs have one-way valves. Because what happens during the low-pressure cycle of your heartbeat between beats is the blood is being pumped up from your feet back up after it's already given oxygen to your body. It's being pumped back up to the heart and lungs. But between beats, it loses pressure, and so you have one-way valves that open when your heart's beating, and when it stops beating, it closes so that the blood can't back up in your veins. Giraffes have that same type of system in its arteries. Arteries are the ones that take oxygenated blood from the heart to the tissues, and veins are the ones that return it back to the heart. He has these one-way valves in his arteries. So when blood is being pumped up its neck between pumps, it will not back up. He has enough blood pressure to burst all the blood vessels in his brain when he bends down. Now here's a huge problem. It takes a huge amount of pressure to get that blood up 18 feet in the air, but when he bends down to get a drink, the force of gravity along with the force of that 25-pound pump of his heart is so great that if he wasn't designed for it, he would literally blow his brains out every time he bent down to get a drink. Is that good for the species if it's going to blow its brains out every time it gets a drink? Won't work. Fortunately, when he lowers his head, two things happen. Those valves close, and so the pressure from the heart is gone, and the blood, which is still speeding on its way to his head, hits a sponge-like group of vessels in the back of his head. It hits this sponge, and what happens when water hits a sponge? It gets greatly slowed down, and it slowly diffuses through the sponge and gives oxygenated blood to the brain, but does not blow the brain out. Beautiful design. Well, that works when he bends down. Now he sees a lion coming after him, and he raises his head up. The problem is, when he raises his head up suddenly, fluid pressure in his brain prevents the capillaries from bursting, good, but when he sees that lion coming, when he raises his head instantly, there should be no blood in his brain, and he should pass out. Incidentally, if he passes out with that lion coming at him, what happens? He dies. The lion eats him. So that's a very bad design, except when he raises up, three things happen. The arterial valves open, so now there is no longer a close-off of the blood coming from the heart. It's now racing up to his head. Problem is, it's got to get 18 feet in the air. That sponge-like set of capillaries at the back of his head, the minute he raises up, automatically squeezes out all the blood that's in it to give him instant oxygen to his brain so he doesn't pass out. And the veins that are going down his neck do close off to keep back pressure so that the blood that's in his head stays up there until the blood in the arteries can get up there to him. Question, did all this design have to be there from the start? It had to be. Otherwise, every time he bent down to get a drink, he blew his brains out, no new giraffe. And every time he saw a predator, he raised up, passed out, and it was a free meal for whatever came. All of this had to be designed from the start. There's no time for it to be a piece at a time like evolution said it was.
In his book On the Origin of Species, Darwin recounted his travels to South America, Australia, and the tip of Africa from 1831 to 1836. He noticed patterns in similar but non-identical finches living in the Galapagos Islands. The species who ate large seeds had large, tough beaks. Those who ate insects had thin, sharp beaks. Darwin was thus credited with discovering evolution. This, however, wasn't a transformation to a different animal, just a variation within the kind of animal. Nonetheless, the Supreme Court ruled in Epperson versus Arkansas, 1968, that it was unconstitutional for schools to prohibit the teaching of evolution while allowing the teaching of creationism. In McLean versus Arkansas, 1981, both creation and evolution science were defined. Creation science means the scientific evidences for creation and inferences from those scientific evidences. Creation science includes the scientific evidences and related inferences that indicate sudden creation of the universe, energy, and life from nothing. 2. The insufficiency of mutation and natural selection in bringing about development of all living kinds from a single organism. 3. Changes only within fixed limits of originally created kinds of plants and animals. 4. Separate ancestry for man and apes. 5. Explanation of the Earth's geology by Catastrophism, including the occurrence of a worldwide flood. And 6. A relatively recent inception of the Earth and living kinds. Evolution science means the scientific evidences for evolution and the inferences from those scientific evidences. Evolution science includes the scientific evidences and related inferences that indicate 1. Emergence by naturalistic processes of the universe from disordered matter and emergence of life from non-life. 2. The sufficiency of mutation and natural selection in bringing about development of present living kinds from simpler early kinds. 3. Emergence by mutation and natural selection by present living kinds from simple earlier kinds. 4. Emergence of man from a common ancestor with apes. 5. Explanation of the Earth's geology and the evolutionary sequence by uniformitarianism. And 6. An inception several billion years ago of the Earth and somewhat later of life. According to this court, science was defined as 1. Guided by natural law. 2. It has to be explanatory by reference to natural law. 3. Is testable against the empirical world. 4. Its conclusions are tentative, i.e., are not necessarily the final word. And 5. It is falsifiable. For this reason, creation science was called unscientific, and rather religious because a literal Genesis was being used to support its presuppositions. Although the creationists brought the same defense, the court still found that the equal treatment did not need to be given to teaching creation and evolution. The Supreme Court upheld in 1987 that it was unconstitutional to require Louisiana schools to teach evolution alongside creationism in Edwards versus Aguillard. Subsequently, in 2005, in a landmark case, Kitzmiller versus Dover Area School District ruled that creationism and intelligent design is religious and not scientific and cannot be mandated for violation of the Establishment Clause. An article dated May 30th, 2023 titled, "Why is India Dropping Evolution and the Periodic Tables from Science School?" They not only dropped it from the curriculum, they removed it from the textbooks as well. Some reasons stated that throughout the article read that they wanted students to be critical thinkers, not memorizers. Another quote emphasized the desire to remove Charles Darwin and Michael Faraday in favor of India's pre-colonial history of science. This was the time before European political rule made its way around the world. In 1983, scientists claimed to have found a 47 million year old fossil named Ida, said to be the first link of primates to humans. They claim Ida has European origins, an area known for a belief in primate evolution. Properly known as Darwinius masale, is quoted as closest thing to direct ancestor. The fossil has lemur-like skeleton, primate features, opposable thumbs, and clawless digits with nails. Quote, "Specimen looks like a really early first fossil monkey that belongs to the group that includes us," says Brian Richmond, biological anthropologist. Joseph Kohlreuter, 1773 to 1806, used evolution to refer to a species having biological changes due to hybridization. Hybridization, a method of genetic swapping, occurs when two complementary single-strand DNA or RNA molecules are bonded, i.e. the liger, offspring of a male lion and female tiger. Interestingly, big cat species such as leopard and cheetah cannot breed together. In the 1920s, Soviet experiments tried to mate female chimps in human sperm to no avail. For hybridization, two animals need to have similar DNA and the same number of chromosomes to procreate. Even animals that can crossbreed often have offspring which are infertile. Chimera, on the other hand, are two genetically different species being fused together in a process called human transmutation, the result of blending humans with animals. However, animal-to-human theories date back to Anaximander of Miletus, 610 to 546 BC. He believes all life began in the sea. He speculated first humans had to derive from a species who could take care of themselves upon birth and concluded that ancestor must have been a fish, being born in water, only spending part of their life on land. Although evolution is pushed to the forefront as scientific fact, it is still only a theory, one that has neither been observed or tested. The issue has always been the missing transitional forms. A fossil is a preserved remnant of an animal or plant buried in the earth. For fossils to be formed, they must be buried quickly so they aren't disturbed by scavengers or the elements. The fossil record is a 200-year-old collection of fossils from around the world in chronological and taxonomical order. The oldest fossil on record is assumed to be 3.5 billion years old, yet not one fossil shows an animal transforming into a man.
What Darwin showed in his work on evolution and natural selection is that we don't need to invoke any supernatural force or power to account for the development of life through time on Earth.
The canine kind, the coyote, and the domestic dog, and there's the feline kind, which is the cats, the tiger and the kitten, and you've got humankind. So Darwin said there'd be a change of kinds over many years, so could you give me one example of observable evidence of a change of kinds?
So, for instance, the fossil record shows the common ancestors of all carnivores, that cats and dogs were once linked, once united by a common ancestor.
How long ago?
This, I believe, was like 60 million years ago.
The scientific method must be observable and repeatable. So could you give me one piece of observable evidence for Darwinian evolution?
Okay, I would point to, as one great example, is look at the genetics of the stickleback.
What's that?
So stickleback fish are a very interesting collection of species that were recently isolated after the end of the Ice Age.
What did they become?
They're various species of sticklebacks.
They stayed as fish.
Well, of course, human beings are still fish.
Human beings are fish?
Why, yes, of course they are.
George Cuvier, 1769 to 1832, and the founding father of paleontology, rejected evolution on the grounds that distinguished groups of animals neatly structured and fully functioning was proof against evolution, especially the fact that some bodily functions were dependent on others and therefore could not come about separately over a process of time. He also noticed drawings of animals and animal mummies thousands of years old showing no signs of change compared to modern animals. The Cambrian explosion is a sudden appearance of major animal groups in the fossil record. Evolutionists claim that the varying layers in which the fossils were buried constitute large gaps of time, thousands, even millions of years. However, Mount St. Helens erupted on May 19, 1980 at 8:32 a.m. after being dormant for over 123 years. The explosion blasted like 20 megatons of TNT, 650 miles per hour, 150 square miles, destroying the forest below. As many as 20,000 trees were plucked up and now floating in a nearby Spirit Lake. While researching the logs, scientists found some to be standing in sedimentary layers of volcanic ash flow, sand, and mud, which had been created in the way sandstone, siltstone, mudstone, and limestone do in the geological column. The column itself is a record of the rock layers found in particular areas around the world. So when I was pulling this infographic, I was trying to line up the rock layers from each of the column-like regions that almost look like time zones. And I noticed that the numbers, they're not lining up from left to right. So if you were going from west to east, it's not adding up. However, if you were to align these from the top number all the way down, but put it in a circle as if this was on a flat earth, it works out perfectly. Just as I suspected. I might be terrible at directions, but my spatial reasoning on paper is good. Let's get back into it. However, the rapid layering of the sediment took days to months, not years, and certainly not millions of them. The record showed fully preserved animals, but these fossils were found all around the world, even atop the mountains, as if set there by cataclysmic waters of a global flood that reached the heavens. The science of naming and classifying life forms is called taxonomy. Classical taxonomy was formerly based on morphology, a branch of biology that deals with the form of living organisms and the relationships between their structures of tissues and anatomical systems, such as the immune, skeletal, and respiratory systems. Modern taxonomy, however, is based on the phylogenetic relationships of organisms, or how multiple species are related. Although Swedish botanist Charles Linnaeus gets the credit as the father of modern taxonomy, his approach to naming life on Earth by means of binomial nomenclature, assigning two names, a genus and species, was labeled as cumbersome and ontologically vacuous, stating further that the Linnaean system lost theological basis when it shifted from creationist tenets to evolutionary theory. In the 18th century, Linnaeus classified humans as Homo sapien, meaning the wise human. So what do the words of Scripture say that would cause academia to deem creationism unscientific? Genesis 1:24 through 26 says, "And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. According to Scripture, God made the living creature to reproduce after their own kind. Kind is the Hebrew word mean, meaning to portion out, sort, and a form encompassing all its species, spoken in a sense of family and race. Genesis 1:23 states, God created great whales. The language and mere observation of the great whales of the ocean would suggest the text is referring to multiple kinds of whales. In Leviticus 11, in listing of unclean fowl, name the eagle, the ostrich, the osprey, vulture, kite, raven, owl, nighthawk, cacao, hawk, little owl, cormorant, great owl, swan, pelican, gear eagle, stork, and heron. Genesis 2:19, and out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. Genesis 1:27, he says, he created the male and female, and goes into detail about the creation of Adam and Eve. Modern science has a theory regarding the common maternal ancestor of all living humans who lived 200,000 years ago in Africa. Although proponents claim this human had the complexion between that of an African and a chimpanzee, but without hair because that evolved to skin along with the dark pigmentation 1.2 million years ago. So which side sounds unscientific? Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope to see you next time. Remember, these are all of the platforms that you can find me on. You can also support by stopping by my online store. I have merch over there, such as my morning reminder collection of mugs. If you're in need, I do provide services on Fiverr like Beta Reader. I also have proofreading and editing, summary writing, as well as research and summary notes. So if you need help with homework or writing content for a website or for a presentation at work, I can definitely help with research and writing, or even putting presentations and things like that together. So just hit me up on Fiverr. And until